Okay, we are moving on to the side of preparing our sermon. All right, we spent a lot of time looking at the exegetical side, how to study the poetic passage. Now we've the last few sessions turned our attention towards the preaching side, and as with the study side, many of the steps are going to be the same. There are a few distinctions or a few differences or additions, maybe is a better way to put it. Special things we need to focus on when we think about poetry. All right. And in light of that, we're going to look at the structure of the sermon. Hopefully some of these things will be a review for you. And if not, then hopefully a good reminder. As I said, here's the overall process. So we've looked at all of these steps. And then the exegetical idea, right? Again, that's the idea of the funnel, right? It's leading us to the author's intended meaning. And then from that, it moves back out towards getting our sermon prepared and preached. And here's just the steps sort of written out and or given in written form to indicate, oops, we're not on this one here. All right, so we look at the exegesis, as I said, and now we're focused on the exposition. And in that exposition, last time we talked about the timeless truth. And today I just want to begin our time. We'll only spend a few moments reminding ourselves about meditating on the passage. And if you'll remember, this whole process, obviously we should be in prayer and dependent all the way through, but it is important to take a specific time after you've done all your study, after you've uncovered the author's intended meaning, after you have also looked at the timeless truths to see what the doctrinal truths the author was basing his passage on, or what he said, what he based the doctrine he based it upon. After we've considered all of those things, it is helpful to then take a step back and look at the passage in light of yourself. As I've said before, meditation is one of the most neglected steps that in the pastor's as the pastor prepares to teach or preach. Often our focus is often on other people, right? Because we're preparing this message for someone else to teach them, to preach to them. And so it's natural for us to just be focused on others, right? As we study and prepare. I understand that. At the same time, we have to remember that all of us are sheep also, right? We have not, in the U.S. we use the expression, I have arrived. And people will say that meaning like, I know everything now, and I'm mature, and I can do everything. And well, that's not the case for us. We definitely are sinners in need of God's grace every day. And we need his word. We need his spirit to feed us and to lead us and to sanctify us. And he does that through his word. And so it's not just the studying part. That's very important because that helps us identify, well, what is the author saying here? And then I think before we focus on others, we first need to focus on ourselves and say, okay, what is God saying here? What is God saying to me here? All right. That we have to be sensitive and tender and open to the truth that we're studying for a lot of reasons, but most importantly, just because I think when we began this journey, you may not remember, it's been a long time now since I first visited you in CDO, and we were up in that schoolroom together, right? Remember, we were all sitting there, and I think it was one of the first things that we said was we quoted 1 Timothy 1, where Paul said, the goal of our instruction is love. And that I believe there Paul's talking first about love for God and then secondarily, love for one another. And so we have to remember that the whole reason we're studying the Bible is not to prepare a sermon. It's to love God and to serve him. And now in serving him, it may be preparing that sermon or preparing a teaching or a lesson. But that's really the service part. We first must recognize our need to love God more. And that love will come out in obedience and in commitment and faithfulness, service. But God gives us his truth. He gives us his word in order that we might grow near to him and near to one another. And so this step, like I said, it's not like, I'm not saying don't worry about praying until this step. We should be praying all the time, every day that we approach studying his word or preparing anything, we should be praying. But I think it's important to take a time away specifically at this point in the process of preparing sermon and just meditate on the passage. All right, so that's really the heart behind this, is we must never forget we too are in need of what this passage has to teach, not just our congregation or our Bible study group. All right, and so with that in mind, again, before proceeding to put the sermon together, we should pause to meditate and take time to do that. And as we discussed before, I think we reviewed this a little bit when we talked about narratives, biblical meditation, remember, it's not the emptying of our mind, but actually it's the filling of it. So it's not like just putting everything out of your mind and, just not have any thoughts and just kind of receive. Well, no, it's actually taking what we've studied and putting that into our mind and thinking about, pondering. That word meditate has this idea of
Throwing the card.
mulling over, of pondering, of literally, it's used of sort of regurgitating, bringing back to mind, considering. It's an active thinking about process. It's not passive. It's not, just letting go and, waiting for something to come. It's actually saying, okay, Tim, you studied this passage. This is what God has said here. And it's recalling, what's the main point? What were the timeless truths? What was the author communicating here? What does he reveal about the intended, his intended meaning? All those things come to mind. And then it is, how does that apply to me? What do I need to learn from this passage? What do I learn about God here? How does it help me love him more? How does it draw me nearer to him? How does it expose something in my life that needs to be worked on? How does it show me to be a better Christian, to be a more faithful follower of the Lord? What does this teach me about Christ? These are the kinds of things. Active questioning and thinking, and that's why I like to memorize the passage as I'm studying it during the week. Especially if it's 4 or 5 verses. If it's 20 or 30, if it's like a whole story or narrative, that's different. But still, I might memorize a verse or two. That's key in that narrative. But yeah, if you're preaching these Psalms, most of these Psalms that I've assigned you are 5 or 6 verses. Try to memorize. You should memorize it. So that you can be thinking about it. You don't have to have it in front of you. And a lot of times when I'm preparing for a message, I'll often, as I go to sleep, be thinking about the passage. And so I'll memorize it. I'll recite it to myself. And so that's the idea of meditation. Okay, all those things. It's basically just focusing our attention on the passage and letting God use it. In fact, there's a great illustration. I don't remember if I shared this with you before. This idea of having tea, right? You see the tea bag in there, right? So imagine that you are this cup of hot water here, right? And that God's word is this tea bag. See that in the water there? Okay. So picture that you are the water here, and this tea bag is like the word of God. Now, reading and studying the scripture or a passage is like dipping the tea bag in the water. All right, drop it in and out. So notice the water gets some color from the tea. You would get some flavor, but if you're just dipping it in and out, you only get a little bit of flavor. Meditation is like leaving the tea bag in the water. It's in Colossians, let the word of Christ richly dwell within you. That's the idea, I think, of meditation. It's to allow that word to sit there, to rest in your mind, your focus, your attention, you're thinking about it, you're concentrating on it. You're not trying to figure out, what illustration can I use for this passage? And, oh, this person really needs to hear this scripture, or what's a clever outline I could use, or, how long is this sermon going to be, or none of that should be in your mind yet. Okay, that will come. Right now, it is take that scripture, that tea bag, and let it sit in the water. Rest in your heart. Right? Psalm 119, your word I have hidden in my heart that I might not sin against you. I've hidden or treasured in my heart. That's really a picture of meditation. It's like this tea bag. It just rests and resides and stays there. And so that's why I'm encouraging you, reminding you this step of meditation is really important, just to be deliberate. Say, okay, I've done all my study. I've put down the exegetical idea, the what, why, how. I've thought about the timeless truths. Okay, now I need to stop. Before I turn my attention to the sermon, before I turn my attention to what I want to say, I need to pause here and put the tea bag in the water and meditate and ponder this passage specifically on how it might apply to me. So I would recommend taking 30 or 45 or 60 minutes and do this meditation, and then let it lead you to a time of prayer and interaction with the Lord. Okay, let God speak to you through the passage, and then you speak to him and talk to him about, pray about these different things. Okay, so that's this idea of meditation. And so what I encourage you guys to do is just in this step, and this will be in your assignment for this, when you meditation, is just write down a paragraph of that. You don't have to, write down the whole time what you were thinking about, but just write a short paragraph. In fact, let me show you, I'll show you an example that I did for Psalm 128. Okay. In fact, first, let's read this Psalm. I'm going to have you read it, and then I'll just show you what I put down as far as a meditation example from it. Kazo, let me ask you could you read the Psalm 128 for us?
Yes, Pastor Tim.
Thank you.
Psalm 128, Song of Ascent. How blessed is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in his ways. When you shall eat of the fruit of your hands, you will be happy, and it will be well with you. Your wife shall be like a fruitful vine within your house, your children like olive plants around your table. Behold, for thus shall the man be blessed who fears the Lord. The Lord bless you from Zion, and may you see the prosperity of Jerusalem all the days of your life. Indeed, may you see your children's children. Peace be upon Israel.
Thank you. Okay, so this psalm I preached a few times, and the first time I preached it, I preached actually on Father's Day when I prepared this message, and so I memorized it during the week. And then for the meditation step, here's just an example. Now, you can write more if you want, but I would say just write down a few sentences. And here's just an example of what I did to show you what I'm talking about as far as for the assignment anyway. This is what I'd like you to put down. Something, just a few thoughts that you had, maybe a few what you prayed, or just what came to your mind as you were meditating on the passage. So for me, I just said, I spent 45 minutes reflecting upon this psalm, and part of the time was used to memorize this psalm. Actually, I should say review it, because I was memorizing it throughout the week. And then to think about how this psalm applies to me. I reflected on my need to pursue the Lord as my greatest priority so that I would be an example to my wife and children. I thought about several ways to do better, to shepherd my children and how to follow the Lord. I asked the Lord to enable me to be an example to my grandchildren, to think of ways I can teach them about Christ. And much prayer was given for the Lord to help me accurately and clearly communicate the psalm. So then as I was praying about it, how it applied to me, then I was also asking the Lord to to help me as I communicated it to congregation. And then I especially prayed for the husbands and fathers to be impacted by the message as I'll preach on Father's Day. So in this step, it's first to consider, how does it apply to me? And then as you're praying and thinking about it, it's certainly fine at some point to ask the Lord to help you as you prepare to teach it to others. That is a part of this process as well. But notice I didn't put down any, a lot of specifics. You certainly can if you want. I just put a few general statements just to give an idea of what this time of meditation, what I did. So I'd like you guys to do the same as you're reflecting on your passage, as you do this meditation. Just write down a few sentences. After you finish that time, just write down a few sentences of what you thought about, what you meditated upon, maybe some things that you prayed, whatever comes to your mind, okay? Does that make sense? I mean, as far as an assignment, it's simple, okay? I'm not asking you to do a lot for that, but to me, it's just more important that you do it, all right? I'm not so concerned about what you write down as really what you do in that time of meditation with the Lord on that passage, doing the self-reflecting and then also praying and the other things that we talked about, okay? So don't skip this step and don't skip it, whether or not you're doing an assignment for Taya, I would encourage you to have this step of meditation as well as you prepare whatever it is, the things that you're preparing for. And I encourage it after you've studied the passage, but before you begin to prepare to teach it. I think that's a good point to just stop and do that meditation. But there's no rule, there's no law like that you can't do it earlier or later. But I just think that's a good point, practically speaking. That's a good point in time to do this particular step. Okay. Any comments or questions about that? Do you guys find meditation easy or a challenge? Anybody want to share?
It's a challenge, Pastor Tim,
It is a challenge, isn't it? What makes it a challenge?
because it will be on our part first with the principles that we cannot give what we don't have. And it's also nice to follow your pattern, because how can you meditate if you have not studied it yet? So if you are done with the exegesis part and all the readings and all the part that we have, the what, why, and how, and then after that we can meditate. That's just like wrapping up what we have studied and preparing it for delivery. So when we deliver, we are first the beneficiary of our work, like what the Bible said, the laborer is the first one to taste the fruit of his labor as a gift from the Lord. That's my comment, Pastor Tim.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because too, if you do it too early, there, like meditation is, we fill our minds with information, but if we haven't done much study ourselves, what are we going to fill it with? We need to know the truth that we're going to be preaching to ourselves and reminding ourselves of and learning from ourselves. And yeah, I think that's a good passage. The laborer receives the first fruit of his labor. That's a good reminder. Anybody else want to share with me what makes meditation a challenge or difficult at times? Or maybe some of you have found you're able to do it easily. Maybe you can help us with what are some ways that would encourage us to be more consistent with it. Anybody? How about you, Nor? What makes it a challenge, or what can make it a challenge to meditate?
Well, you have just reminded us of what for me personally, is what actually I do before I study, and I hardly use topical preaching. I go systematic, chapter by chapter, and I sometimes, or most of the time, I share that with my wife and children. That's what I read that and do this and do that. But again, you have nail it down. More reminder. It's not an option. It's not an excuse. So it is a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hardly can go to the pulpit and the word is not touching me. It is beyond thinkable. So.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I think sometimes it's just there's so much pressure, to get things done, and we don't have, we only have so much time in the day, and there's pressure to have a message ready or doing other things that sometimes seems like it's hard to take that extra what seems like extra time to then meditate on the passage, but that can actually be the most fruitful part of the whole process, really. Anybody else have any thoughts? Yeah, Michael?
Last Sunday, I was being reminded with regard to it's a confirmation from what you said, Pastor Tim, to what I've studied last week with regard to meditation, because I preached Psalms 27 last Sunday, and I was being reminded with regard to meditation when Joshua and when God told to Joshua, he doesn't give any instructions on how to win the battle going to the promised land, but to meditate his whole day and night. So it's very important, even in David's time. So he gave some instructions with regard to meditation, especially in Psalms 27. And he said one particular verse there is, I think, in verse 4, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to meditate his word in his temple. So something like that, Pastor Tim. So I get that idea from what instruction given from the Lord to Joshua. Yeah, it's very important to meditate his word as again as the first beneficiary, and then to the recipient, to the congregation. You as the first beneficiary.
Yeah. Even Joshua, right, he was the leader of the people, and just God telling him that, don't worry about the military strategy. Worry about knowing what I have said
Yeah.
and doing that. So We even see that, right? Early on, remember with the battle of Ai, when the people failed because there was disobedience in the camp, right? Some Achan had taken things that God had said not to take. He took some from Jericho, and so that just reminds us, they defeated Jericho, right? Knocked the walls down just from them blowing a trumpet. But then Ai, with this little town, that had hardly any people in it, defeated Israel, as a consequence of disobedience. So that just was a clear example, even right near the beginning of their time going into the land, where if they would seek the Lord and be faithful to him, then God would give them the victory. And if they didn't, then they would have trouble. So yeah, I think that's a great passage. And really, too, reminds us the importance to the Lord of meditating on his word, right? How important it is to the Lord that we make that a part of our lives. So especially in preaching, right? We spent all this time studying the passage, even as you just said, Sid, and we spent all this time learning it. And then so why not benefit from that ourselves first and learn from and apply in our own lives? Good. Anybody else? Or Michael, did you have anything else?
It's okay. It's all right, Pastor Tim.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, let's just an encouragement, guys. This isn't the first time we've discussed this topic, but it's always good to remind ourselves about it. So that's why I wanted to do that before moving on to the next steps. But so as we consider that, now that once you've really spent that time meditating on the text, now we're ready to generate the homiletical idea. And that's the next step in the process. And it's sort of the parallel to the exegetical idea, right? The exegetical idea expresses the author's main point, the what, why, how. The homiletical idea is the preacher's main point and outline. So the homiletical idea essentially is taking the exegetical idea and the timeless truths, I should incorporate that, and the timeless truths upon which it is based, and then applies it to the present day hearers, or basically to your audience, to your congregation. All right. So, but we can think of the parallel in thought in terms of the author's main point. That's the exegetical idea. The homiletical idea, the author's main point should lead us to the preacher's main point. The author's outline will be a guide for the preacher's outline. And then there's the author's message to his audience, and then the preacher's application of the text to his audience. Okay, those are the links. Now, what we have to be careful of is that we don't make the homiletical idea the same as the exegetical, meaning don't have, David tells of, David seeks refuge in the Lord. That's an exegetical point, not homiletical. Homiletical would be, you need to take refuge in the Lord, right? So here's just an example. David takes refuge in God. That's more of the exegetical idea. That's from the author's point of view. But the homiletical would be, you need to take refuge in God, or maybe, it's more to the point, take refuge in God. And then maybe, 3 ways to take refuge in God, or whatever the particular passage however it leads you. All right. So they're going to be connected. The homiletical idea and the exegetical idea are going to be connected, right? The homiletical must be based upon the exegetical, but it's going to be an application of the text. all right? Not what the author was saying to his audience necessarily, what you need to say to yours. Now, in many cases, it could be the exact same thing. Many passages, the timeless truths are the same, or the application of the timeless truth in the passage may be exactly the same for the original author and his audience as it will be for you and your hearers. You know, like Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leads me beside green pastures with still waters. You know, that's the same for David as it is for us. Now, maybe the statement, he prepares a table before me in the midst of my enemies. Well, in David's case, he had a particular background where that makes sense. Now, for us, it might be a different way, different image or picture, and how that would apply to us today than it did for David. All right, so there might be an example where you take the author's meaning and apply it to your hearers, and that may be a little different, but that's the idea. It's taking the exegetical idea and the timeless truths upon which it is based, and then apply it to your hearers. Okay, that's the homiletical idea. Questions on that? Okay. Well, homiletical, was there a question? Sorry, but I heard something. Or a comment? Okay. Homiletical idea is essentially made up of, or consists of, the sermon main point and the outline. Okay. So your homiletical idea is two parts. Okay. It's the sermon main point and it's your sermon outline. Okay. That's a little different than the exegetical idea. Remember the exegetical idea, it's the author's what, which is the main point. And then I want you to find the why, that's the purpose, the author's reason for that main point, why he said it, and then his how is the outline. Okay. Now in your sermon, you'll give the purpose or the reason typically in the message. It could be part of the main point though as well. Take refuge in God so that you will not be shaken. Okay, that's sort of a what, why. You could do that. Okay. Or you could express the why within the sermon and the application things there. Okay. But basically you need a sermon main point. We'll talk more about that in a minute, and an outline. Okay. Now the sermon main point, you know, there's all these different terms people have for it, but it's basically the main idea of your sermon. What's the point? It's the summary of your sermon in a very clear, short, accurate statement derived from, again, the exegetical idea and the timeless truths of the passage. Okay. So it comes from the text, but it's going to apply to your hearers. Okay. That's the sermon main point. All right. You can't have a sermon without it. All right. In fact, let me just have us read again. I think John MacArthur's statement here is really important. Brilio, I'm going to ask, did you read this statement by Pastor MacArthur here? Thank you.
I will try, sir. First of all, make sure that every expository message has a single theme that is crystal clear, so that your people know exactly what you are saying, how you have supported it, and how it is applied to their lives. The thing that kills people in what is sometimes called expository preaching is randomly meandering through a passage.
Yeah, meandering is the idea of like wandering, like you know, a guy that opens up the passage and he starts talking about it, you know, and come up with a story and then a point over here and then a thought over here. And so it's like meandering is just wandering around. That's what the idea is, right? He says the thing that kills people, he doesn't mean literally, of course, but it's just people not really, there's no point to their sermon. They're just kind of talking about the passage. Okay, and we can't do that. We need to, just like the original author had a main point. He was aiming his hearers to a certain point.
Mm.
We need to do the same. I remember one of my seminary professors, he talked about sermons like a bullet. He said, like when you go out hunting, you know, there's a lot of hunters here in the US, you know, they like to go hunting, especially where I live now. They go out and basically they call it one shot, one kill. You know, basically that one bullet and aim and hit your target. Okay. It's not a, you know, bunch of bullets shooting everywhere. Okay. You won't hit your target necessarily. The target runs off. So he just talked about, you know, just one shot, aim it. He said it, the sermon should be like a ball that you throw, not a bag of sand, right? What happens if you have a bag of sand and you throw it, it like scatters everywhere, right? But a ball hits one mark, one spot. And so he said, think of the sermon like that. I think a lot of times when we preach, we have so many thoughts and we just we dump everything, right? We say so many things and they could be very good, helpful things, but sometimes, often people get scattered and confused. And it's easy just to aim the message at a particular point. All right. And then next week, if you want to talk about, focus on another truth from the passage, then do that then, but don't try to dump everything into your sermon. So you have a hour and a half message, but how much did people really get? But if you focus on one thing and do 45 minutes and just focus on that, and they'll remember that much better. All right. Now, some people, they can absorb a lot. Okay. Some people you can throw a sandbag but that's not that many, honestly. Most people,
So,
you need
Pastor
to,
Tim,
yeah,
we should be using a rifle, not a shotgun.
yes. Use a bullet, not a buckshot. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. So use the one shot, the ball. Don't throw the sandbag, but just throw the ball. That's how most people are going to will benefit from that. Like I said, there's always some people who are able to capture more, but we don't want to just benefit some, we want to benefit many. All right. So focus your message. Yes, a rifle, not a shotgun. That's an important distinction. And so that's why I like this statement, because he says a single theme that is crystal clear. All right, keep it focused and clear. And that reminds us of, and here's some principles of an effective sermon main point. So there's 4 characteristics of an effective or good sermon main point. All right, first, it must be accurate. And that's why we do all the exegesis, okay? So that it will be accurate. So your sermon main point needs to be, derived accurately from the text. Just like Paul told Timothy, be diligent to show you're proved, as a workman not ashamed, handling accurately, cutting straight the word of truth. So that's why we invest all of our time and effort in the exegesis. Secondly, and this is as you move from the study of a passage, that's to help you be accurate. The second is you need to be clear. All right. You need to be accurate. You must rightly understand what the author said, but then you need to be clear. You must be able to explain to your hearers what the passage means and what it means for them. Okay? So keep it simple. Avoid complicated exegesis, and I would add, have structure to your sermon so that you can be so that people can follow you. Okay? We'll cover structure maybe a little bit later. All right, but the goal is clarity. Again, it's great that you understand the text. That is required. That's necessary. But it's not helpful if you cannot help your people understand the passage. That's what you're there for, right? Not just that you understand the text. Yes, you must be accurate. But the people you're teaching need to understand it too, right? That's what you're supposed to be doing, is you're explaining the passage so that they understand and apply it. We saw an example of that in Nehemiah. You know, when Ezra, when the people stood up, and was it Nehemiah 8, I believe, chapter 8, the people stood up, and it says that Ezra read from the law, right? They stood up most of them all morning. Remember that text? And they're listening. And that in that passage, it also said that Ezra appointed other scribes, that's students of the law, to explain what the passage meant. So he didn't just read it. There's also explanation. Part of the reason for that was the fact that everybody then spoke Aramaic. And most of the Old Testament's in Hebrew. So he was reading Hebrew. So part of it, they needed explanation because some of the people didn't really understand Hebrew that well. Sound familiar? Right? Nobody that I've preached to that I know of speaks ancient Hebrew. So I don't really speak ancient Hebrew, all right? I know a little bit of Hebrew or Greek. So in the same way, we need to take what that passage, what God has said in the text, and explain it. And that's what we see happening in Nehemiah and Ezra's day. He not only read the passage, he explained it. In fact, I think if I remember right, the Greek word that translated that word explained is hermeneuo, where we get hermeneutics from. But in any event, this idea of explanation, so that it says said Nehemiah that the hearers understood the meaning of the passage. All right, this is an important thing for us to remember. Accuracy is the priority, and then the very next priority is clarity. All right, we need to be understood. So you can think of it this way: accuracy is we need to understand what the passage means. Clarity is we need to then be understood, okay, by our hearers. All right, see the difference? All right, to be accurate is to be a good student. That's good. But to be clear is to be a good teacher. All right. I don't know about you, but I mean, when I went to I went to UCLA in engineering, right? I got my degree in electrical engineering, and there were some professors, and I took a lot of physics classes too, a lot of quantum mechanics, and a lot of these things. And a lot of the teachers and professors at UCLA were brilliant. I mean, these guys were just, really smart. They were at this university for a good reason. They were, many of them were the head of their field. One of my professors invented radar. So I sat in the class. He was old at the time. He invented radar in World War II. So I took a class from him on radar. I don't know. It was hard, but so the guy is brilliant, but he wasn't a very good teacher. So he understood it. I mean, he invented it, but he didn't do a good job helping me understand it. Okay. So you could have, there are guys I know that are just brilliant. They can study the Bible and they can understand it, and they can know all these deep truths, and and it only takes them a few hours to to study, and it would take me 15 hours. But some of them are not very good teachers. So for us, we have to be both. All right. You have to be a good student and a good teacher. Okay. And to be a good teacher means that you're clear. To be clear, to be able to explain something so that your hearers understand. Okay. That's the, so an effective sermon point needs to reflect that. It should be accurate and it should be clear so that when someone hears it, it makes sense to them. They know what it means. All right. Now, your sermon obviously can help explain that, so that the sermon point sometimes can be made more clear as you preach the message, but it should be clear as it stands. Now, a third characteristic of an effective sermon point is that it is directed. It is directed. All right. Connected to your hearers. Make it application. So, for example, as we said before, David took refuge in God. Okay. Now, that is could reflect the main point of the passage, but it's not directed to your hearers. Okay. This could be an accurate statement. It could be a clear statement, but it's not a directed one. So this would need to be made to, directed to your hearers, take refuge in God. Okay. That's aimed at my hearers. All right. So it should be directed. And finally, it should be memorable. Okay. Memorable is important as well. All right. Memorable is not clarity. Okay. Clarity is that it can be understood. Memorable is that did you word it in such a way that it's easier to remember it? Okay. And probably the best way to do that is try to make it brief, but also I say striking. That is something that makes it memorable, either using the same first letter or maybe a clever way to say it, something like that. All right, so we'll look at an example in a minute. Okay, so these all make an effective sermon point. Accuracy, clarity, directed, and memorable. All right. Keep these in mind because they're going to show up again, actually, when we look at a sermon outline as well. All right. Any questions on this? These are the four characteristics or qualities, elements of a good or effective sermon main point. Anybody have questions or comments? Okay, hopefully it makes sense.
Can it be, Pastor Tim, uh, and making your main point like it's a declarative something or declarative statement? Is it okay?
Yeah, they're okay. Like you could say here, so a directed statement
Like
would
Pastor
be,
Tim, trust in God is the result of knowing, seeking, following, and waiting upon Him.
Yeah,
something like that.
or you could have 3 ways to take refuge in God, or to take, sorry, refuge in God, or the faithful person will. I mean, these are
Okay.
something like that, where it's not calling the person to respond, but it is reflecting the truth of the passage. 3 ways to take refuge in God is clear, right? I know he's going to give me 3 ways, but it's not as directed. But it's not a wrong sermon main point. I just think it's more effective if you make it directed. But I have many sermons where I just make a declaration. Especially when it's maybe something about, God is holy. Okay, that's not really a point you can direct someone. I mean, you could say, know that God is holy. You could do that. That's directed. But sometimes you might just say,
If, excuse
just,
me, sir.
what's that?
What if we start in interrogative form?
Yeah.
Like, for example, why we take refuge in God? Then our main point is by answering.
Yeah. Why
We take refuge
should I take refuge in God?
in God.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. And that point would be a little directive, right? Why should I take refuge? So it is asking a question of me, or why should you take refuge, or we could say we, or something like that. But yeah, in fact, I just preached a sermon not long ago where my main point was a question. How can I endure? So certainly that's acceptable. And I think too, if you're preaching week in and week out, sometimes it is good to vary. I knew one guy, many times when he preached, it was often, 3 characteristics of a godly man, or 3 ways to know God better, or 3 steps to a content life. It's kind of the same every week. So it's good to give some variety at times too. That will help people to remember. But yeah, a question is a good method as well at times. I would say just more often than not, have a directed main point. That should be your first, your objective, your goal. But certainly there are times where, having a declarative or a question would be perfectly fine. Okay. Any other comments or questions before we move on? I think, you must be accurate. All right. That's a command. Paul said it. Be diligent to show yourself approved, handling accurate the word of truth. So there's no, it's not like try your best to be accurate most of the time. That's not acceptable. And I would say clarity is not far behind that. You have to be able to explain clearly. Now, you have to have a sermon point that's clear. Now, whether or not it's directed or even memorable, I mean, those are nice. Those are helpful. But I would say accurate and clear are mandates. You have to, as a preacher, be accurate and clear in your sermon main point. Well, really all your sermon, but directed and memorable, I would say those are, I think, make a more effective sermon main point, but they're not as critical as the first 2. Okay. So sometimes if you want to be creative and do something a little different, that's fine. But you cannot sacrifice accuracy and you cannot sacrifice clarity. All right. Otherwise, you don't accomplish. I mean, your main goal when you preach is to rightly divide the word, to be accurate, and so that your hearers know it and can respond. And if you haven't clearly explained it, they're not going to know what to do with it. And if you're not accurate, then they're not going to rightly apply it either. Okay. So they need to know and apply the truth. And God has put you in the role to help them do that. All right. Obviously, I know it's His Holy Spirit, but His Holy Spirit works through means. Okay. And so we want to be faithful and effective instruments in TAM. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Is it clear? I hope. Am I being clear? I know I'm being directed. Directive.
Pastor Tim,
Yeah, Sid.
up to what percent we can sacrifice accuracy compared to clarity?
Well,
Up to what degree?
I don't think you have to sacrifice either one. I mean, I guess, yeah, if you just read the text in, your Psalm in Hebrew and only, of course, that would be the most accurate. They wouldn't have any translation issues, but nobody's going to understand you. So, I mean, I guess in that sense, maybe there's some challenge there, but I don't think you really should have to think about you sacrifice much to just focus on accuracy, but you can also be clear. I mean, Jesus was the master, right? He was obviously 100% accurate in everything He said. And He was also clear. In fact, in Matthew 13, after He gave all those parables, He then turned to the disciples and He said, do you understand? So He wanted to make sure He was clear. And they said, yes, we do. And when they didn't understand, sometimes they would ask questions. Remember the parable of the sower? The disciples didn't know what He meant by that. So He explained it. And then oh, okay, now we know what you mean. So there, Jesus didn't sacrifice clarity for accuracy. He just had to explain it more so that they comprehended. Now, I think,
because Pastor Tim, we
yeah,
can be as much as accurate with the information at hand. So in that case, can we say that we are sacrificing accuracy because we are only accurate up to the information at hand? With the light of all the information we have, we are trying to be accurate as much as we can with the light from God. But compared to others, we can be less accurate. No?
yeah,
Because others can charge us of not doing it.
yeah. No, that's correct. I mean, we're limited. So Jesus was 100% accurate, but yeah, we have limitations. We don't know the original language. We didn't live in the time when it was written. We didn't know personally the people who were writing or receiving. We don't understand the culture perfectly. So there's a lot of things that limit our ability to be 100%, unfortunately. And that's where we rely on the Spirit. We be as faithful as we can and ask that the Spirit give us the insight and the accuracy that we need. So that's why Paul said, be diligent to show yourself approved. So the idea is work hard to do your best to be faithful. So in that sense, though, we are imperfect and we are far removed from when the original was written. So there's going to be some challenges to accuracy, some limits upon us. So that's why we have different opinions, at times when godly men who teach the same passage sometimes will have a different interpretation. That reflects, exposes our limitations. So yeah, that's something always to keep in mind. That's why, again, I think we go back to the being prayerful, dependent, and be diligent, right? Diligent and dependent. That's all we can do. And make every effort by God's grace. And I think too, that's as far as accuracy. And then as far as clarity, we have to work hard at that too. Okay. But yeah, that's a good point. Good question. Any others? Any other comments, thoughts, questions? Let's look at an example here. Use Psalm 128. All right, so here, just from that psalm, I have this as a sermon main point. The blessings of being a man who fears God. All right, so we want to ask ourselves, all right, is this sermon main point accurate? Knowing what we know from Psalm 128. Alan, what would you say? Is this sermon main point, does that seem pretty close to what the main idea of the passage is, the psalm?
Yeah, that's accurate. That's accurate.
Yeah, I would say so, right? The focus, the main idea of the passage was blessing, right? And it's reflected here. And then this idea of the man who fears God is blessed. So it's repeated. But yes, this would be the focus of the psalm. All right. Now, next question would be, is it clear?
Yeah.
And I would say, yeah,
Also
I
clear.
think it's pretty clear, right? It indicates the topic, the main idea, clearly. All right. Maybe explaining what blessings we're talking about. Of course, that could come in the midst of the sermon, but I think people generally understand that. Now, the question is here, would we say that this is directed?
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet, right? It's it's not really directed to the hearers. Okay, it's more of it's a declarative statement, as Michael brought up earlier. Okay, so this isn't a bad sermon main point. It is accurate and it is clear, so that's good, but it's not yet really directed at the hearers. And as far as being memorable, it's 9 words. It's fairly brief, but not striking. Okay, it's a plain statement. Okay, again, it's perfectly fine. This would be a fine sermon main point. But now the question is there anything we can do that could make a better sermon main point to maintain accuracy and clarity, but maybe make it more directive, make it more memorable? Does anybody have what would be a better sermon main point? Again, maybe something more directed and more memorable. How about this one? Be a man who fears God and be blessed. Okay, what about this one? What's changed with this one?
I think it's now directed to the audience, to the hearers.
To the hearers, yes. Now, it's not really more memorable at this point, but it is definitely directed, right? It's be a man. So that's in the form of a command,
Or
right?
instructive.
Yeah, it's instructive. Okay. And it's still reflecting on the man who fears God is blessed. So it's still maintaining the accuracy and clarity, I think. How about this one? Let's try to make it more memorable. Be a blessed boy. How's that? Is it more directed than the original here?
No,
Hold on a second. Well, it's more directed than this one, right? In the original, because it's in the form of a command. All right, so it is more directed. The question is it clear, more clear? It's actually a
it's
little
not
less
clear.
clear, I
No,
think,
no,
isn't it?
no.
It's open-ended.
It's not.
Yeah.
Ambiguous.
Yeah.
And notice this word
A little
boy,
less.
okay?
Yeah.
Now I tried to make it, it's more striking now, right? More memorable, because it is, look at the B words, be blessed boy. Okay, so that makes it more memorable, perhaps, but it's a little less clear now, isn't it? And we might even say a little less accurate. Because boy has the idea of, could mean like a young person, right? Instead of a man.
Immaturity.
Yeah. So here, notice, we sacrifice accuracy and clarity to be more memorable. So this one, I would say, no. Okay. Yes, it's more memorable. It is directed, but we sacrifice clarity and accuracy to do it. Okay. So I would say that one is not what we would want. Okay, let's try another one.
Pastor, how about this one?
Okay, go ahead.
Fear God and be a blessed man.
Fear God and be a blessed man. Okay, that's I think we're still accurate and clear, so that's good. It is directed. Not necessarily more memorable though. Okay, still like 3-6 words. It's not really striking, but it is more directed, and we didn't sacrifice accuracy or clarity to do it. How about, let me refine this a little bit. Fear God and find blessing. How about that? Okay, maybe not as clear as the original up here, but it is directed. I think it is more memorable. You have fear and find. Okay.
Pastor, how about
Yeah, Michael.
fear God and be blessed?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the same as this one.
Okay.
All right, it is more directed. We could say fear God and find good. Now that is definitely more memorable, right? Notice fear and find, and then God and good. Okay, that can make this, it is directed. It is more memorable, probably the most memorable as far as, but it's a little bit less clear. What does good mean versus blessing? Okay, so maybe a little less clear. All right, so I kind of like maybe this one is the best overall, but you see that what we're talking about here, sort of the challenge in having all of these characteristics together: accurate, clear, directed, memorable. That's hard to do. One of my teachers in a doctor ministry program, he said he would usually spend an hour or 2 hours just on the sermon main point, because he really felt it was important to have all these elements, that it's memorable, so he really tried to work at, okay, I want to be memorable, but not sacrifice accurate or clear. All right, and that's hard to do. So sometimes and this may touch on Sid's question earlier, if you can't make it all four, then just make sure the first two are met, accurate and clear. All right. Don't compromise those. But if you can make it accurate, clear, and directed and memorable, all right, that's the best. But a lot of preachers, they sort of turn that upside down. They want it to be memorable, clever, catchy. And a lot of times they'll sacrifice accuracy or clarity to do that. So we don't want that. We want to be accurate and clear. That's our priority. So that's what, like, for example, on this sermon, on this psalm, you know, this is a perfectly fine sermon main point because it's accurate and clear. So then what I'll do is usually I'll come up with something like that. Okay, what's the most accurate and clear sermon main point I can think of first? Then I will say, okay, can I take this and make it more directed and more memorable? And then I play around with it, you know, like we were doing here. I try different ones and think about that. And sometimes you'll find one. Sometimes you won't. But again, our goal is these four. Is it accurate? Is it clear, directed, memorable? Okay, and really, again, in this order of priority.
Sir Tim, it's
Yeah.
like the four-way test.
The
It's
four-way
like the
test?
four-way test.
Yeah.
Is it truth? Is it beneficial to all? The four-way test.
Just like Kiwanis, huh?
All right. Okay, so there's probably, you know, a better one out there for this particular message, but I just, you know, wanted you to see sort of the thought process. All right. Now let's turn our attention to the outline. And really it's going to be the same discussion, guys. Okay. The sermon main point is the summary of the message in a short sentence. The outline is those subpoints of your sermon. Okay, the how of your sermon, essentially. And it should be connected to the author's outline. Okay. So, right, in a poem, your outline is going to be based upon the stanzas. Okay. Which, for example, you know, once you understand the stanzas, then that's really the outline. And then what you can do is take each of those stanzas and summarize it in a short statement. And again, that statement should have the same four characteristics as the sermon main point. The outline, each outline point should be accurate. Okay, so it should be derived from the author's outline. Don't force a wrong or confusing word. Should be clear. Again, just like the sermon main point, it's, you know, make sure your outline points are connected to your sermon main point. You know, if you have say, for example, you know, 3 ways to find refuge in God, don't have 2 outline points. 1 is pray and 2 is read. All right, that's not 3 ways. That's 2 ways. Okay. And make sure your outline's connected to your main point. Make sure it's clear. So I like to, you know, use similar terms. The outline points, it's helpful if they're directed, just like the sermon main point, and it's helpful if they're memorable. Okay. So again, it's pretty much the same principle. So let's think about this from our psalm. Again, I just went with the fear God and find blessing. Okay, and then here's sort of a proposed outline. Declared blessing, domestic blessing, durable blessing. Notice each of them contains this idea of of blessing. All right, so it reflects, they reflect the focus of the psalm, the main point, which is on blessing. The question, is it clear? Is it clear? Yes, but maybe the points are too short. Declare blessing, what does that exactly mean? Domestic blessing, durable blessing. So we may want to think about lengthening each point, so make it a little more clear. And are these points directed here? Are they directed to the hearers? Not really, right? They're more declarative. So the main point is directed, but the outline points are really more declarative. Again, that's not bad or wrong, but it's like, oh, maybe I can do something to make these more directed and to make them a little more clear. And then finally, is it memorable? And I would say, yes, it's memorable. Notice there, you know, the first word, each of it begins with D, and then the second word is blessing. So they're short, only one word different in each one. And they all begin with the same letter. So certainly this is memorable and accurate, but maybe we need to work at clarity and then maybe direct it, okay? Maybe putting something like find at the beginning of this, or fear and find. Fear God and find declared blessing. Fear God and find domestic blessing. Fear God and find durable blessing. Okay, now it's much more connected to the main point. It's directed. It's still maybe the clarity isn't there, because declared, domestic, durable, what do those mean? But again, part of the clarity can be made up for in the actual explanation of the point. Okay. All right. So it's really the same process for the sermon main point and the outline points, really. Just trying to think of, the key is the main point, but you also want your outline points to be the same: accurate, clear, directed, and memorable. All right. Okay. Questions on any of that? Hopefully, does it make sense?
Yes, Pastor Tim, it makes sense.
Okay. Good. Hopefully that was memorable too.
Yes.
So, okay. Well, let's see. Here's what I'd like to do, I think. Why don't we, let's just stop here, and we've got next week, we'll talk about, I'll just briefly review the sermon structure for poetry, and then talk about preaching poetry. Like, what are the things we need to consider when we preach a poem, especially, you know, in comparison to like an epistle. What's similar, but what's different? So we'll talk about that, and then maybe you guys give some input as well. But and so then that will cover pretty much everything in regards to poetry that we need to understand. What I wanted to do is, I ended a little early, I wanted to show you the schedule here very quickly. Make sure it's clear, because let me just go to here. Let's see, share this with you. Hopefully you can see this all right. All right, let's go to Canvas. All right, again, course syllabus, the link, this is the Holy Grail here, everything's here. All right, I just want to go to the schedule and assigned passages quickly for a moment. Review a couple things with you. Okay, it's a little bit small. Let me see if I can. All right, can you guys see this okay? Hopefully. All right. All right, so here's where we begin. Wow, way back in May. Man, COVID's been terrible. All right, so this just has the schedule, what we've covered. Notice I've got the assignments as well when I gave the assignment. So the first ones were reading. Okay, those are straightforward, guys, just reading. And I'll show you where to get that in a second. Then when we got to the poetic analysis, we had some written assignments, the setting and structure of your psalm passage, parallelism. And by the way, I'm showing this to you because let's say, okay, I'm a little behind. I haven't done my imagery yet or my parallelism. Now I don't remember everything with that. So here's, you can go to the schedule and look and see, okay, we covered parallelism in session 14 and maybe 13. So I can go back and look at my notes there. Okay. So basically now, this is today. The next assignment is posted. It's the primary matters, which is basically just the meditation, your exegetical idea, and your homiletical idea, and your timeless truths from your passage. Okay. And again, for the assignment, here, we'll just go there quick. Let's see. All right, so if you go here and let's say you go down to, all right, now the next assignment that's given here for my passage, this is session 24, right, or 25. Here I've got the assignment. You can just get it here. You can download it. And here's what it looks like. And in the assignment, again, as I've done on the other ones, guys, I put the format here. I've given you an example. All right, so here's the format. I explain it. There's 5 steps to this assignment. Consult resources, just show what resources you consulted. That's all I'm asking you to do. Identify the exegetical idea. Now, yeah, it's very short, but it takes a lot of thought and effort, all right? The timeless truths, the meditation, and then the generate homiletical idea. Okay? That's this assignment. Now, then I put a section, do this for your passage. Okay? So that's this assignment. And I have this for all the assignments are here. All right? Assignment 310, I've got here from session 22. Assignment 39. Okay? So they're all here. So once you complete the assignment, of course, as you guys know, you can just go to assignments and then look for the one you're doing. Okay, I want to do the primary matters. So I'm going to go to primary matters. Where'd it go? 311. Start the assignment. Okay, and you know how this goes. So I've got here you can download the assignment from this part too, and then upload it when you're done. Okay. So,
Okay. Okay.
Let's see, let me get out of. Anyway, so again, you can go to the main thing though is everything. I put everything here on this big oversized link. All right. So, and of course the posted videos and all that. All right. So,
Okay.
now going back to the schedule for a moment. So we've got this week is here, notice, and then the 18th next week we have a session where again we're going to talk about preaching poetry, and then I'll be off. We'll be off for 4 weeks because I'll be in Pakistan, and I won't be able to teach from there. So you have a window opportunity, okay? Because what I'd like to do is have you get your sermon done by the end of next month, because we're going to move our attention to the wisdom literature, all right, and particularly Proverbs. Notice that's going to be the focus the next several sessions together, okay?
Okay.
All right, I'll talk more about the sermon next week after we talk about preaching, but I just wanted you to be aware, and again to remind you where you can find this information if you have any questions.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. Any questions on that, guys? And again, if you're behind, just go with the next assignment that's due and just start, work on it. And we'll just move through. I know it's a challenge. I know you guys have been through a lot. It's been hard. I totally understand. So, you know me, I have not been hard on you. I don't think I haven't pressured you because I know it's been a challenge. And really all this is hopefully it's for your benefit to try to help equip you. And the best way to be equipped is not just listening to me, talk, but it's to do it yourself and get the feedback. All right, just to practice. And so these assignments, I want you to do them because it's intentional, just so you can go through the process as you prepare for your passage. Okay. And then, by the way, on that, your each passage assigned Psalms and Proverbs passages on there. And I have also, some of you have gone ahead and done Proverbs assignments, which is fine. I've assigned them. Make sure that you separate, though. Don't put both assignments in the Psalms one. You need to separate your Psalms and Proverbs assignments. So turn in the Proverbs part with the Proverbs assignments, which again, I put on Canvas, so you should be able to find it. If not, message me and I'll help you. Okay? Okay.
Pastor Tim,
Yes, sir.
regarding the 2,500, I was not able to send it. Can I send it to a group?
Send what?
The amount we have to pay?
Oh yeah, the tuition. Michael, you mentioned last week you were trying to work out the church.
Yes.
Did that get
Yes.
resolved, or do you need the information of where to send the money?
That's we're going to talk about that, Pastor Tim. Pastor Tim, actually, I'm going to ask you this week. Can we have a short meeting regard since we're here? And according to Anna, she's talking to Mom. So they are just processing it.
Okay, and that was for the whole group class, right?
Because she yes, that's for the whole Circasot, that's for the whole class.
Thank you, Pastor Mike. Pastor Mike, so I will not be going to send the money.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
That's
you,
we're going to
Pastor
talk
Mike.
about after.
Salamat kayo.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I think
I'll just, I'll resend you the instructions, Michael, the account information, in case you don't have it. But yeah, so basically, guys, for tuition,
you already said send it to me or you send it to me already, I think.
yeah, I did. Do you still need it, or you have it?
Okay. I have it, Pastor Tim.
Okay, okay,
The video account
yeah,
of yeah, I have it already.
okay, good. Okay, so you guys should all be
I'll just give
covered then.
feedback, Pastor Tim, after give you feedback, Pastor Tim, after uh, what's the what do you call that? After the meeting or after Anna's feedback regarding the issuance of the payment.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Michael, why don't you go ahead and close this in prayer then?